Do you qualify for Portugal's digital nomad visa? The first step in your application is confirming that you will qualify for the visa. This is a fair amount of work to apply for this visa, and you don't want to spend the time or the money if you're not confident that you will qualify. So, here's what you need to know about qualifying for Portugal's digital nomad visa. There are 4 requirements that we think you should consider at the outset. This is what you'll need in place to qualify. There are other documents and steps to follow in order to have a successful application, but these are the big ones to be aware of up front. First up, of course, the income requirement. In order to qualify for Portugal's digital nomad visa, you have to be making 4 times the Portuguese minimum wage each month. So for 2023, the Portuguese minimum wage is 760 euro, meaning 4 times that amount, you will need to make at least 3,040 euro per month for a single applicant. We do expect the minimum wage in 2024 will increase to 820 euro per month, so you can do the math. We'll confirm that once the budgetary bill has been passed for the year. If you want to include dependents, like a spouse or a child, you will have to increase that amount. For any adult dependent, like a spouse or a parent, add 50% again of that 4 times the minimum wage amount. So for 2023, that's going to be 1,520 euro. To add a child, add 30% of that amount again. So again, as an example, for 2023, that would be an additional 912 euro per month. We should also note, this is for mainland Portugal and the Azores. If you want to move to Madeira, they actually have a slightly different minimum wage. So in 2023, their minimum wage is a little bit higher at 785 euro per month. You'll need to increase these levels accordingly if you're looking to move there. The second thing to be aware of to know if you qualify in advance are work documents. You can apply for the Portuguese digital nomad visa either as an employee or as a remote worker who's a contractor or self-employed or business owner. So the work documents do differ slightly depending on which category you choose. We'll get into those details later in the course, but the thing that you need to know about qualification is that either your employer or your clients, depending on how you're applying, will need to be okay with you working remotely from Portugal. You will need to provide an employer letter or a client letter that states your salary or your contract amount and that is signed by your boss or the HR department or one of your main clients or several of your clients. The third thing to be aware of in advance to make sure that you're going to qualify for this digital nomad visa is having a criminal record certificate that you present as part of your application. So this is a background check. In the United States, it's provided by the FBI, an FBI background check. Anywhere that you've lived in the last year, any country, will need to provide one of these as part of your application. Generally speaking, if you were convicted of a crime that would have resulted in a prison sentence of over a year in Portugal, you will not qualify for the digital nomad visa. However, be aware, for most European countries, they do wipe your record clean after 5 years. So if your conviction occurred more than 5 years ago, you may be fine and still have a successful application. If you'd like to speak to an expert about this, please feel free to reach out. And finally, the fourth and final thing that you should be aware of to see if you qualify for the Portuguese digital nomad visa is the money that's associated with the application. Interestingly, for this particular visa, you're not really going to be worried so much about the application fees to the government. It's going to be the costs that you incur for other parts of your application packet. For Portugal, the big one is proof of accommodation. There's also some expense associated with opening a bank account in Portugal. So let's start with proof of accommodation. Unless you're planning on buying a house in Portugal and presenting a deed as part of your application, you'll need to have a 12-month lease. The tricky thing is that you need to have this 12-month lease in place before you apply for your visa. So you need to have already signed a 12-month lease at that point. Then you're going to have to wait, typically a couple of months, to see if you get approved. In this time, you'll be paying rent, of course, for an apartment that you may not be living in. So there are some expenses associated with that. You may be paying rent in 2 places. Additionally, because the Portuguese rental market is pretty competitive, you should expect to have to pay a couple of months up front in a combination of deposit and advanced rent. It's very common in Portugal, especially in the more competitive markets of Lisbon and the Algarve, to be asked to pay a fair amount up front to secure an apartment when you sign your lease. So this could look like 2 to 3 months worth of rent as a deposit, plus 2 to 3 months advance rent. Next, opening a Portuguese bank account. This is another one of the requirements for applying for the digital nomad visa. The thing you need to know about this is that once you open the account, typically in order to keep it open, within 30 days you have to fund that account. In addition, you're going to want to ideally put a fair amount of money in there before your appointment date, just to show that you have sufficient savings and that you're bringing some of your money into Portugal. What we typically recommend is for a single applicant putting in at least 12 months of the minimum wage. So for 2023, that's €9,120. Of course, this adds up. And if you're bringing dependents, we would recommend, ideally, that you increase that amount. Again, 50% more if you're bringing an adult dependent, 30% more if you're bringing a child dependent. So let's just look at an example here so you can tell what I'm talking about. So let's say that you're applying for the digital nomad visa and you want to include your spouse and 2 children. The ideal amount, again, not required, but ideal amount that you would be putting into your Portuguese bank account would be €9,120 for you, plus €4,560 for your spouse, plus €3,192 per child. So that's a total of €16,872 that you're going to want to transfer into your Portuguese bank account. This is your money, of course, and you can use it how you would like, especially once you're in Portugal, but it does require having some savings up front. So, do you qualify for Portugal's digital nomad visa? If so, we hope that you'll stick with us and follow through this course to learn how to apply and learn all of our tips and tricks for a quickly approved, successful application. We'll get you to Portugal as quickly as possible.